Mr. Al Metcalf, Columbus, Georgia. Interview conducted by Dr. Charles Johnson, University of Tennessee History Department, August 7th, 1987, at the Cherry Hill Inn in Cherry Hill, New Jersey.
Background of where you live?
Yeah, it's back in 41, 42, whatever.
Yeah. And I don't really remember the dates. Seems like it was December 42, about the time we were drafted, or I was drafted. And I just go on what took place and
where were you living then?
Where I was living, where I was born and raised, and so on and so forth. Okay. These are 30-minute cassettes, or
45.
45. Okay, it should be 45.
I just talked with Dick Peters, and we talked for about an hour and a half. And I talked with George for about an hour and a half. So,
well, see what happens here. Let me think here a little first.
Sure.
Is this a push on? It's push to operate mic. Okay.
I just put it on, try to forget about it.
Okay. Well, let's see. I was born and raised in a small town in Vermont, a town called Underhill. We were on the west side of Mount Mansfield. And of course, Mount Mansfield is well known for the town of Stowe, which is a ski resort area. And I suspect I was about 18 years old or something like that when I was drafted. And
you finished high school, or had you gone through high school? Or?
We finished school at that time, and I was raised on a farm and worked in highway construction for an engineer, and of course was still studying. And I reported for duty at Fort Devens,
Massachusetts.
which is Massachusetts, down at Ayr, Mass. And while at Fort Devens, I somehow got strep throat and was hospitalized for a week or two, and then missed out on the shipment of troops that I was supposed to have been on or with, and it was fortunate for me because they all went to the infantry, the foot infantry, which I had no desire to go to.
Mm-hmm. Walk a lot.
All the time. So the group that I shipped out with headed out, and we rode for days on the train, and ended up at Camp Polk, Louisiana. And, we got off the train and went into Polk, and ended up at North Camp Polk, and were assigned to the 8th Armored Division, which was a new armored division, and it was filling at that time. And we were all assigned to the 49th AIR. Well, we were happy about that because we saw that AIR and we thought, oh, God, we're in the Air Force. But everyone wanted to go to the Air Force. There was a certain glamour about it. And, but as it turns out, that AIR was Armored Infantry Regiment. So we took our lumps as they were, and we went ahead and went about our duties with great vigor and enthusiasm, and we were young and strong, and really we all felt very patriotic. We knew that we were fighting a dangerous enemy, and it was a no-holds-barred situation. We started training in the most elementary things, weapons disassembly, and close order drill, basic movements, things of that type.
Basic.
And we were very fortunate to have the wonderful cadre that we had. Our cadre had been stationed at Fort Knox and had cadred the cadres for several armored divisions. So we were very fortunate in that respect. They were, without exception, good non-commissioned officers and good officers. And in fact, my first platoon sergeant I ever had, his name was Bill Crocker. And he's living today up in Milan, Missouri, which is in north central Missouri. I visited Bill last year. Wonderful gentleman. He's 78 this year. To get back to our story, we were pretty well disciplined people to start with. We were not a rowdy bunch. Well, we had a certain bit of rowdiness about us. All young men do. And we would normally, of course, been cutting up like everyone else, maybe. But we knew the Army was the Army. Discipline was a way of life. We all tried to do our best. We were billeted in the old wooden barracks, about 30 men to a floor. And that was the spring of 43. Right. And temperature wasn't bad then, because I guess it was March. Hadn't really got hot. And we trained away there. Seems to me that it may have been 12 weeks of basic. I think that's what it was. But our training was intense. We would, of course, get up real early in the morning, 5:30 perhaps, make our beds and fall out for reveille and eat and do the finishing touches in the barracks and out for training, all sorts of training, basic. And would go until retreat at night. And in those days, we'd more than likely train in the evenings, sometimes till 10 o'clock. We had one day off a week, as I recall.
It makes for a real long day.
It does. It really does. And but this is sometime. This wasn't always. And we, as I recall, didn't have guard duty or anything like that, or anything of any importance until after the first 12 weeks. I believe, I'm not telling that to be gospel truth, but then we started our advanced basic, which lasted for probably 20 weeks. Dick Peters might have shed some light on that.
Didn't mention that.
Didn't mention it. Well, then it was in crew served weapons and squad tactics, things of that nature. And we worked at that and did well, I know, because probably the fact that we're here today would testify. And we finished that phase of training. And sometime around Thanksgiving time, we went to the field. In fact, the day after Thanksgiving, I believe, we went to the field and stayed in the field. We had been out for, let's say, 3 or 4 days or a week at a time before. But after Thanksgiving, we went to the field and stayed in the field for 3 months, living out in the woods and pastures of western Louisiana and eastern Texas. And we had a shower as best we could get it. We used a helmet liner, or a steel helmet rather, for a a bathtub in some cases, and wash yourself off. Well, in those days we called it a whore bath. And we went ahead with this training and became quite proficient, we were told.
Had you been assigned to a squad by that
Well,
time?
yes, I was in the second platoon. I drove the light machine gun squad, which Bill Schmidt was the squad leader. And of course, the drivers in those days, you didn't just drive, you also knew all about the other things that had to be done. And we were on this extended maneuver when I was selected to attend special training at Fort Knox, which pleased the devil out of me. It was a school at the Armored School at Fort Knox, which I was interested in anyway. I had fair mechanical ability, I guess. So I was selected to go there, and I missed a lot of that field training. I didn't think I needed it anyway. I may have. That's neither here nor there. But I recall that Christmas time in '43, we were in the field near Jasper, Texas. We had a big sleet storm. Trees hanging down, broken down, hanging with ice. And of course we didn't like it, but we knew we had to do it. And we pitched our tents and had these old pine stumps burning. They burned just like gasoline, smoke, and soot. And all that
Black smoke, tar, soot. Yeah.
And at night you could see 1,000 campfires out there.
Like some story in the Civil War.
Well, I suspect so, yes. Well, I went to Fort Knox to this training program, as I mentioned before. And while there, I got scarlet fever. So I missed coming back with my regular group. Well, I finally returned to Camp Polk. The division had moved into the South Camp then. And that's when Bill and the bunch from ASCP and so on came in and joined us. Because they shipped down a tremendous number of our people as fillers because of the attack in Italy. They had to have a lot more infantrymen available to make up their losses. So the mastermind, I suspect at that time, could see the end, hopefully. So they canceled the cadet program and the ASTP program and sent those fellows in to make up for the losses that we had sustained. So then we went ahead with special training and we were tying up those loose ends that existed. Special training for certain individuals and so on. And we were rapidly preparing for deployment. And of course, we knew we were going overseas. We hoped Europe.
Mm-hmm.
We had, I hoped Europe. I'm not saying everyone did. But I always thought, well, if I have to fight, I'd rather fight someone that I could see. Maybe. I always envisioned fighting the Japanese as fighting a person hiding, I could tell him from the bush.
For people who fought on Okinawa and Iwo Jima, that's absolutely true. We didn't see anybody.
It was a good friend of mine down at Columbus, Colonel Robert Fowler, was in the fighting all through Indonesia. We talked long hours about it. Remarkably fine gentleman. But anyway, I believe it was November, we finally got ready and we boarded the train and came, as I recall, my lord, up way out into Alabama and up through Roanoke, a roundabout way, as I recall, through Alexandria, Virginia, because when we came through Alexandria, the train stopped. This was maybe 3 days later, because it went all over the place, to confuse the enemy if the enemy was there, wherever he was. And I remember Bob Beers, who incidentally just came in a little while ago from Connecticut, stated that he thought he could see his house in Alexandria where the train stopped. And, kind of a sad thing, his wife and children were there. Not if he had children, I can't remember. But anyway, we went on to Camp Kilmer, and of course it was such a busy time, hustle, bustle. There was no time to stop and do anything. We used to say to each other, "Do you suppose the war will be over in 10 years?" And we would assure each other that it would be. But sometimes it looked gloomy. But we just kind of, we were young and hopeful and all that. We just kept pushing ahead. I remember when we were at Kilmer, Bill Wheeler, George, his father had an important job with the government, I believe production control. And he was down in New York, and he contacted Bill. And so Bill and a couple of other fellows and myself and I went in, and Mr. Wheeler met us, and Mrs. Wheeler came down from Boston on a train, and she met us, and they took us out to a delightful dinner, and took us to the Empire State Building and to see the Rockettes at the Radio City Music Hall. Splendid evening.
Touch of civilization.
Oh gosh, yes. And then we seemed like we got on a bus for Camp Kilmer again. And we shipped down almost immediately. We were on a boat called His Majesty's Ship Samaria. Jim MacDonald knew quite a bit about that boat, an Indian mail boat or something, I don't know what it was. And we, I don't know how long, maybe 8 or 10 days, I don't know. But we landed in Liverpool, no, Southampton, England. And went by train to a place called Tidsworth. Tidsworth Barracks was there. It was an old British garrison town. But we didn't live in the barracks. We were up on a hill back in the town. Tents. We were issued a certain number of pieces of coal daily, or not much per man. We had little stoves that resembled an ice cream cone upside down, and put out just about as much heat. And so we'd get by with those, and we, being resourceful folks, and a lot of us were off the farm, we saw these beech trees out back, beautiful old beech trees, huge things. So we thought, well, if we get a coal fire going, this beech will burn pretty good. So we started removing limbs from these trees. Well, immediately the British authorities got wind of it and came down to see about it. And they said to the commander, who was Captain Joe Finley, that this would have to stop, that we were mutilating the crown's trees. We couldn't have that because they belonged to the crown. And whether it was cold or not, it didn't seem to make too much difference to them. But I don't just recall how it was. Well, anyway, some of the fellows thought, well, hell, if we can't cut the trees, we got to do something else. So there was a pub downtown called the Ram. In fact, I have a picture of it in my album downstairs, one of those books. So a group went downtown to the Ram and had a few scotch and whatever they could get, warm beer, fish and chips. Then they hauled some of the furniture out. brought it back. Well, that made a good fire. Of course, it was old. And then we got in Dutch over that. Well, it wasn't right. It wasn't right, of course. But sometimes, you know, as Colonel North's secretary said, sometimes you stretch it a little bit. But anyway, I'm not saying that you're right.
Yeah.
After the furniture incident, of course, time passed rather quickly there. And it was miserable living. It was foggy and damp and cold, and there wasn't much we could do. We got our vehicles.
I haven't talked to anybody who enjoyed the English weather.
Well, it was very bad that time of year. England is a beautiful country. But the beauty I could see was when we go downtown at night and have a beer or something and come back up the hill, walking up the hill on these streets and see the amber glass in the windows. And imagine being comfortable. But anyway, we survived that. And we had a chance to go to London for 3 days. A 3-day pass. There was a little lull there. So Bill Wheeler and a bunch of us, Bill and I went together, I recall. We hadn't had the money to go, and a lot of them didn't. So we went to London for 3 days, and we met a couple of girls there through some program. And we went out and stayed at their home. It was very pleasant, and we got a special ration of food to help them out. And I remember they lived in Woolwich Arsenal. And then we went back to where we lived there, Tisworth. And the passes came for the other half of the group to go. Well, a lot of them didn't have any money, so Bill's mother had wired some money to England, so we had money again. So since there wasn't enough of them to fill the pass list, we went again. Well, and we had a pleasant time. After we returned, it was time to depart. So we got loaded up. Or in the meantime, stunt that we pulled. You never have enough vehicles in a unit like that. So the big ordnance supply depot where we had drawn a lot of vehicles from. Well, people that were stationed there were quite careless about leaving their vehicles parked around. So personnel in our unit appropriated, as I recall, a 3/4-ton cargo truck, a 1.5-deuce cargo truck. They found another one. They couldn't get it started, so they stole another one and towed it home. Well, Colonel Poinier had been over across for the fighting and came back, and he said he understood that some vehicles had been false or falsely appropriated or whatever. He said he knew we needed transportation, but he said, let's have honor among thieves. Well, we'd already done it. Damage. So some of those vehicles found their way across the channel, and we went across some LSTs and went into Le Havre and up the river. What the hell is the name of that river? Whatever it is, all the way up to Rouen, France. And then embarked and started driving toward the front. Went through Verdun. I believe there was snow on the ground. I believe I have a picture down my album that someone took of a night near Verdun. We camped down, of course. And drove on east. Snow and ice.
Yeah, somebody said it was one of the worst.
It's a bad storm there in that part of the country. Well, it was the forerunner of the Battle of the Bulge storms. Well, I wouldn't say forerunner, it was after the worst part, or during it. And we finally got to Metz. We passed Metz. We went on to some place in the Nene-Trier-Thionville Triangle, I believe it was called. And we camped out in the woods, and then we knew that things were going to start happening, but we didn't know when or where. And we moved into a town called Stirk. It was right on the French border, right on the Moselle River. Now, how we got across the Moselle River, it skips my mind. Like Admiral Poindexter. Sometimes my mind doesn't work right. No,
I think yours probably works better than his.
I'm not criticizing the Admiral. I think he's a brilliant man. I regret that he was stuck under such horrible circumstances. I hope he thought he was doing right. But we were there in Cirque and making the best of it.
Dick Peters said that he was probably more apprehensive at Camp Kilmer about what was coming than just before you all went in at Ninick.
I don't know when I was most apprehensive. I guess what really got me stirred up was there in Cirque. This was during the afternoon. Traffic all over the place, military. Well, here come about several deuce-and-a-half trucks stacked right up to the top of the board with dead American soldiers, frozen. Or not frozen, but I mean dead soldiers, just stacked up. And someone said, look at those Germans, you must be killing them all. And another person said, they're not Germans, they're Americans. You know, the 94th Infantry Division patch on our overcoat hanging out with an arm. I remember this as well as today. That would bring it home to you. It certainly did. And, but my God. And it was a sickening feeling. When you're right in the thick of it, shooting and fighting, you don't think that much about it. But to see something like that was devastating. To me, it was. And we went about our business. I remember a fellow named Blackie Fredericks from Conshohocken, PA. The old Blackie, he went out, there was some old meat place there, some Frenchman friend. Well, he wanted to sell Blackie some fresh meat. Blackie, you can buy this fresh meat and cook it in his mess kit. Well, he's got it pretty well cooked, and he had it pretty well cooked, and someone told him it was dog meat. Well, I don't know what he did with it, but it was just an incident that occurred. And it seems to me that sometime during maybe 8 o'clock at night or 9 or something, we were alerted. And I'm sure maybe Dick could remember more about it than that than I can. And what we did, I just don't remember. And then later at night, we were alerted again. Well, sometime during the night, we moved down. Probably early morning. We drove up, moving along in combat formation, a certain interval, as I remember. And the order of march and everything, I can't remember. Jim McDonald might shed some light on that or Dick. Excuse me. But we got up to a little town, just a small place. I went back to it in 1962, 61. Well, World War II. And we moved the bulk of the company up as close as possible to the fighting, as close as possible to Nanning, somewhere near the Dragon's Teeth, as I remember, but maybe this little hamlet. And there, the soldiers disembarked, and we had to take the tracks back to this little hamlet, as I recall. And wait for calls to either haul ammunition up or haul wounded out or do whatever was required. I don't remember, I don't think it was the next day. We were making runs all the time, doing one thing and another. And the Siegfried line had been breached there by the 94th Division. I believe there was one or two tanks shot out right there. We would make a run for it through there and get in what we were supposed to get in and get those persons out that were wounded. And the dominant feature there was an old castle or schloss, they call it, up on the commanding area on a high hill. I have pictures in an album down there of it. And there was a regular fortress. Those old castles, if you've been there, you know the walls are sometimes 8 feet thick of solid rock concrete. And they would shoot the devil out of us. And they were trying to get them out of there. Well, there's no pretty hard situation to attack something like that down low. Well, it seems like maybe it was 2 days later on one of the runs, Colonel Poinier, our battalion commander, of the 7th Battalion, was severely injured. I remember his head, his face and head was on massive blood. And another person and I carried him to my vehicle and took him back to the aid station down on the outskirts of Minnick. And I remember him. There were many injured. But of course, I remembered him because he was the commander. And, we lost Captain Cook. No, we didn't. Captain Cook was in battalion at that time, battalion headquarters. We lost Captain Finley there, I believe. But he wasn't killed. He was injured. And I remember individual names I can't remember. I remember helping in evacuating wounded and hauling supplies in and doing a certain amount of damage to the enemy as we could.
You were under artillery fire pretty much of the time.
Well, there was artillery fire and mortar fire, and the Germans had some very effective rockets.
Nebelwerfer.
Well, they were ahead of us in rocket weapons, type weapons, I think. But we were in there about a week, seems like. And we pulled back into the corner of France, I think. But we had taken a pretty good shellacking. Most of our casualties were frostbite and overexposure to the elements and so on. We had a lot of wounded.
Yeah, Bill Huler was saying when I talked with him that he got down out of the line and was in pretty bad shape.
Yes, he was. He was
cold and frostbite.
I remember helping Bill.
Yeah, he said you found him kind of in a doorway or leaning up against a building or something.
Yeah. We moved back into France in an area, and I can't remember what the name of the place was. It was just some old bombed out, shot out buildings, but it was a little shelter, and we could get a fire going with something and some warm food and that sort of thing. And we stayed there for a few days. And then we got the order to roll again. We were really not in too good shape to roll again. And one of the problems, we didn't have camouflage clothes. Well, we had all that snow. We should have had, but we didn't. Supplying an army is not an easy job. And when you roll as fast as Patton's army did, they got all the way up there. Of course, it made supply more difficult. and drove night and day on the ice and snow, and we made it.
Track vehicles are hard to handle in
Oh,
ice.
very much so, very much so. The tank with the rubber treads is near helpless. Darn tank there, you put the brakes on, you just keep right on going. Of course, you have tremendous weight. And
How were the half tracks to handle it?
half tracks, they were hard to handle too. Of course, the glare, ice, and snow, you know, it was packed down with other vehicles. They were hard to handle. But we, trying to think, we got up the line where we were supposed to be and continued the battle. But I can't give you specifics in that area because I don't remember. And we were released from the Third Army, assigned to the, I think, 9th Army, under 12th Army Group.
Right.
I was under 12th Army Group anyway, but we were literally given to the British. We went to British control. That was part of Ike's, later on when I learned what happened, I didn't care for him for that. I suppose he did the best he could. But anyway, we were under, I think, General Simpson then.
Yeah.
And we were near the British. The British were good soldiers. But I don't think Monty had much of it. I don't think Monty was very skillful in conducting a major campaign, as evidenced by a bridge too far, which was a true situation, but it was a hopeless situation to start with. I think only an idiot would have attempted it. Now that I've read the histories and things, can't say the name of that town, Arnheim, Holland.
Yeah.
Shoot. Like Patton said, don't go into something unless you think you can win or have a chance of it. But that's neither here nor there. We moved along from there to Rurman, Holland, to that area, and lost men. We won battles, and of course we had everything on our side, you might say. We had tremendous supply, and we had a good Air Force, and plenty of fuel. We had things going for us. If the Germans had the logistics that we had, it wouldn't have been as easy as it was. The German soldier was a superb soldier. He was well disciplined. He was naturally motivated. That was his home. And
How would you rate their equipment vis-a-vis American equipment?
Excellent. Their equipment was excellent. Their field guns, they used their heads. They used the 88 millimeter shell. Well, the 88 millimeter could be used as a short range field piece, a medium range field piece, or a long range field piece. Their small tanks mounted the medium range, and their big tanks, which was Mark 8 and so on, mounted the long barreled 88, which had a muzzle velocity of around 4,000 feet a second. They could go in one side of our tank and out the other. Easy. The armor plate on the Mark 8 tank was about at least a foot thick. And when you slope it over like this, what do you have? 16 or 18 inches at least. Well, our little Mark 4s would fire at a Mark 8 German tank, and you'd hear this hellish scream as the shell would ricochet. I recall seeing a tank, a Mark 8 up on a hill in an orchard, well camouflaged. We're moving along in task force convoy, a tank and a half track, a tank and a half track. We had one M39 tank destroyer and an M8 scout car from the 88th Recon, Colonel Harrington's outfit from Burlington, Vermont. Well, they shot the scout car out of business with that big rifle. They shot the M39, which was a diesel-powered tank destroyer, mounted the first 90 millimeter gun we had in the theater. tank type high velocity gun.
Mm-hmm.
They got that, and they shot a whole bunch of Mark 4s or M4 tanks out. Just shot them one after another. Boom, boom, boom. Every shot was another tank. Go up in smoke. Finally, I remember Ralph Geithner, and I don't know if George or Bill was with us right there or not. We were caught in the open, you might say. We got into a ditch there, and Geithner and I were under an old barn watching the proceedings, watching our equipment get knocked to pieces. I couldn't do a thing about it. And our battalion had one or two M24s. That was a light tank with a 75 millimeter gun. Good little tank. But it just didn't have the power. Well, they got down in the ditch there, just the turret sticking out. I've never been sure if they were stuck or that's where they planned on being. But they had two shells that they called hypo shells. They were an extremely powerful shell. And they couldn't fire, I believe, over 2 or 3 in that gun without risking blowing the breech apart. Well, they loaded one of those birds, and they shot that Tiger tank, got him in the tracks, I guess in the engine compartment. It started burning. And that put an end to that. Otherwise, I don't know how much damage he'd done. But that's just one tank. One tank did plenty of damage. Seems to me like Captain Reinhardt was our CO then. We had lost Captain Finley, of course. Reinhardt was he's from Louisville. We call him a goon. Pretty good fellow, but he whined when he talked. Couldn't help it. And Robinson, his name was Captain Robinson. Cecil W. Robinson, his name was. I remember distinctly because I can see him now on the road in his Jeep. Well, anyway, we moved out from there and moved on to our next objective. We'd go from town to town. We had the 18th Tank Battalion with us. Of course, the ordnance was behind us. And I can't recall which particular spots we were in at the time. We finally we got to the Rhine River, and we held up at a little town called Heinsbeck. There we lived at a big farm, big old rich farm home on the Rhine. And I remember the artillery shells, all these little roads. There'd be artillery shells stacked 3 and 4 feet high, just like cordwood along. You've seen it through the country. Miles of artillery shells stacked there.
Theirs or ours? Or?
Ours waiting to cross the Rhine. And of course, when we got ready to cross the Rhine, we had Army artillery, Corps artillery, Division artillery. My God, we could probably put 10,000 guns in action. I don't know. But I know when we took the city of Dorston, we had 1,000 guns fired.
That must have
been
incredible.
It was. They expected terrible resistance, I guess. It wasn't that bad. And we had Army artillery and Corps artillery. We had the big guns back. It seems like there were 280s. Oh, might have been. Is that 8 inches? Oh, it's
240, I think.
240. I'm sorry, 240 millimeters. Big rifles.
Yeah.
They had them back there, long distance.
Yeah, they'll fire 20 miles.
Oh, God. And I know our 8 inches in Vietnam were firing. We could fire 8, 9 miles accurate if we could see where we're going to hit. But we got ready to cross the Rhine. We went. Of course, there was absolutely nothing left within quite a distance of the river at the crossing points. Couldn't anything stand up under that barrage. But we crossed there. I remember one night we stopped, and we were going to hold up at a certain point. Seems to me like it was Ralph Wagner and myself, or me. Well, we dug our foxholes, not very deep ones. Well, it was a drizzling rain, and we put some hay or straw we found down in the hole, and we put some old tin roofing and boards and stuff over, and we piled dirt and stuff on top. And we got in there, and we figured we were going to be in pretty good shape, but we were actually behind the lines then quite a good bit. And no sooner did we got sacked out when they moved these big guns up, probably not more than 300-400 yards back of us, maybe 500 yards. We just got settled down. They started firing those big guns. Of course, they were shooting, as you said, 8 or 10 miles ahead. Well, every time they'd shoot, it seemed like the whole hole would go up and down. And that's one of these things that happen. And we went on across Central Europe, and the war was winding down, and we ended up in Verniga Road, which is a beautiful Bill Schmidt was their squad leader. He had been, of course, right along. An excellent soldier, very resourceful, terrific guy. And
yeah, there seems to be a generally good opinion both of Bill Schmidt and Dick Peters.
Oh yes, they were outstanding soldiers, terrific soldiers. And when we were going to hole up in a town, we'd select whatever house we happened to decide we wanted to stay in. Well, Bill selected this beautiful big mansion, and it was a baroness from Berlin to live in there. Of course, all these well-to-do people were evacuated away from Berlin, especially since the Russians were approaching. Beautiful furnishings. It was a magnificent place. Very attractive lady. I recall she had a daughter named Ingrid, a beautiful young lady, and maids all over the place. Well, we went up and talked to her, and she spoke perfect, flawless Oxford English. And the children did too, the young lady. And she asked Bill, I recall Bill spoke, I believe he spoke some German. But anyway, we talked English because they did. And I remember her asking Bill, this may have been on a Thursday or Friday, we were as close to over, very nearly over. And she wanted us to stay and listen to the Berlin Symphony on the radio Sunday. Well, and of course, it was hard for me to comprehend such a situation. And she wanted to know and apologizing about the places we could stay. And she seemed to have no animosity toward us whatsoever. Nor did we her. And I mean, that's what, I don't know. I had bad feelings against people that did bad things, and sometimes at the moment you do. But when you stop and think, we're all human. But I really had to tax my mind to imagine how this lady could be so oblivious of what was going on.
The world was coming apart.
Yeah, her world was just coming apart. And so we were right there in Vernon Road for a few days. Bill will enlighten you on that probably. And the war was over. It was about the 6th or 7th of May, probably. Beautiful spring there. And this Vernon Road was a town where they made movies, the German film industry. Beautiful streets, forest, tree, and everything was so pretty. And it was untouched by anything. Nothing there at all. It was right at the beginning of the Hartz Mountain, probably on the northwest side, I don't remember. But we moved on when we pulled out of there, we moved on into the Hartz Mountain, went up to St. Andreasburg, which is a town way up in the hills. And there we stayed for maybe a month. Bill Schmidt went to England on leave. And after about a month, during that time, we'd patrol the mountains. And we would screen the forest. What screening meant you go through a man every so many yards and look for German soldiers that were still there. A lot of them didn't know the war was over. And most of them surrendered.
I understand you took some casualties in that operation.
Yes, we did. Dick Peters was then a lieutenant, got a field commission. And he had one patrol. They were rolling through. And someone opened fire on his group from a house. Beautiful house. Well, what Dick did what any of us would have done. I believe he whirled that tank around and he blew that place apart, burned the house, and whatnot. That's how I remember now. I wouldn't say it's gospel truth. Like Bill said, don't like it. I assured him that I wouldn't. I said, I'll tell him everything I know about you. He said, that's what I was afraid of. Well, anything I could tell about Bill wouldn't be anything to be afraid of. He's a tremendous person. Well, anyway, we patrolled every couple of days or so. We'd take turns with different squads. Mine, of course, was a light machine gun squad. We'd roll down those roads and run these patrols back to St. Andreasburg, and it was a pleasant time for us, except that we wanted to be home because it was a beautiful country and beautiful surroundings. And it was spring, and we went about our business, and then we were ordered to move to Czechoslovakia. Well, we got out of the Harz Mountains, and I guess we were on probably the Bayreuth-Nuremberg Autobahn. I don't remember. Of course, I knew the road very well when I went back to Europe in 1960. But that's probably the road we were on because it was the main north-south Autobahn. Might have been the one from Bad Hirschfeld down to Nuremberg. I don't know. But anyway, we went. Then we moved into Czechoslovakia. Well, as we got into the Sudetenland, I think it is going into Czechoslovakia. All the people were out there with flowers and waving. The Czech people were beautiful people. Just fantastic people. They were so happy to see us coming. And we went through the countryside there, all the way to Pilsen. And that's where we stayed until the division broke up. And our men went to other units to await departure home. But after that, of course, I went to another division in Bavaria, moved around to different areas until it was time to go home. But I guess I never have been in a unit where there was more closeness in spirit than this.
Why do you think that was?
Well, I attribute that to many things. We were all draftees. The draft will give an army the very best. The enlistees, though generally good, are not the best. When every man serves, as I think he should, if he doesn't think he owes that to his nation, he should leave. I think I attribute that to, in the first place, the quality of men that we had were as good as you could get. They were a cross-section of the nation. We had college men, farmers, would-be doctors, mechanics, everything. We had men from every walk of life. And we had a very definite purpose. We trained together from the start. It was like a family. Very special people.
Did your squad stay, the light machine gun squad stay pretty much the same throughout most of the combat?
Yes, it did, unless we lost a man.
Yeah.
When we lose a man, we get a replacement. But otherwise, if we hadn't lost anyone, we'd come out with the same people we went in with.
But this
just
is
like a family.
the disadvantage of that.
Very definite disadvantage. You're too close.
Yeah, if you lose somebody, you lose family.
Agreed. But special people. I came home right after the first of the year, 46. During the time, just before I came home, this is irrelevant possibly, but I moved down to went into the 83rd Infantry Division to wait my return. And we moved into Bavaria, stayed there a month or so. Then we moved on to Linz, Austria, stayed there, or Steyr, Austria, stayed there until late December. Then we moved back up to a place called Achau, Achau, which was in the Bavarian Alps foothills. Lived in the von Preisen Castle. We were there Christmas and New Year's, and then shortly after we got on a train, and a 40 and 8 train, that's where you were in boxcars with any kind of a stove you could imagine, and went all the way to the heart of France in this contraption. But I remember one incident coming from Steyr, Austria, up into Germany, where we stayed in the castle. We moved up there. I had a crazy fellow from Texas who had worked on some railroad out there. He knew quite a bit about the equipment. And the operational trains were good there, those that were running. There wasn't much bombing down the mountain there. This fellow's name was Slim Sword. His name wasn't Slim, but that's what they call him, because that was what he looked like. And he got a hold of some booze, and he was up in the electric locomotive with this Austrian engineer. And he got the engineer about half crossed. The old sword didn't think we were going fast enough. We must have had 20, maybe 15 or 20 coaches on behind those electric locomotives. So he cranked that rheostat around, and we were going too fast through those mountains, probably doing 70 or 80 miles an hour. I remember it was night, and I thought, my Lord, we shouldn't be going this fast. We could get killed. Oh my God, could kill everyone. And when we got where we were going, old Sword climbed down and says, "How did you like that ride?" He said, "We're a little ahead of schedule." That's something I don't know. I never forgot it. But we moved on, came on home, and I was discharged and went into electrical contracting.
By the time you came home, of course, a lot of people had been home. There weren't any parades for you, probably.
Oh no. This was early in January, maybe late in January, 46. Now a lot of fellows came home on what they call rotation leaves, where they'd come home and have a 30 or 60-day leave, and then they were scheduled to go to the Pacific to fight. But of course, in the meantime, DJ Day had occurred, and so that was off, and they came home, they were discharged, which was a wonderful thing. But some of us had too many points to be involved in that, and not enough points to do something else. We're in this other group. But, anyway, I got out and went into business, several different ventures, and I came back in service in 49. And
in the Army again?
I came back in the Army, and I missed it. There was something I was missing. Maybe the adventure and the comrading and one thing and another. So I very shortly went to teaching. I was teaching in ordnance schools at Fort Knox, and later to Leonard Wood, Missouri. And I went up through the ranks. And
did you see service in Korea?
Oh yes, I went from Leonard Wood, Missouri to Korea. Served there 18 months. And
artillery or infantry?
No, I was in combat engineers in Korea, and was a engineer maintenance, or equipment maintenance sergeant, and ordnance maintenance sergeant. And I was in good shape for it. I was school trained. I was a teacher in that field, and I was very successful in that area, and probably contributed as much as I could to the success of the unit. And tried to have her come over to Japan. And she did. And on her way over, I was reassigned to the 24th Infantry Division, which was scheduled to go back to Korea. So I was sent back to Korea. She was on her way to Japan. I was on my way to Korea again. And I flew back to meet her and got her set up in quarters in Tokyo for a few days. Then we moved north to Matsushima, where I got her in quarters, and I had to fly back to Korea. And I got 4 or 5 months before I got back to Japan. General Maxwell Taylor, who died just recently, wonderful gentleman. Not because of what he did for us, but I knew him through the years from time to time. When he was chief of staff at Fort Myer, chief of staff of the Army, I had occasion to know him. And I drove him when he was Far East at times. And anyway, there's about 700 or 800 of us that were in my category in the 24th Division. So General Taylor went up there and find out what the devil was going on, because there's a lot of complaints. We were supposed to be in Japan, but they sent us back, and they put us on indefinite TDY, which we didn't consider to be right. But whether it was or not, it's beside the point. General Taylor came over there and checked into things and had a ship diverted from its regular path and picked us up and took us back to Japan. And, so I believe I got home the day before Christmas. It was the best Christmas I guess I had.
Christmas of 50 or 51 or?
That would be 53.
Oh, 53. Okay. Taylor, right?
Yeah. And there, Camp Matsushima is where it was, where my wife was. It was a very small post right on the Pacific. Beautiful little place. I considered it that way. My wife and I had really never got to live together much. We were married, and I was shipped over very shortly after. She lived in Little Rock there, where she was with Southwestern Bell, home country. And I was the post transportation sergeant, and shortly after the post sergeant major, until I left a year and a half later. And then we came back to Fort Knox, Kentucky, and there I worked in schools. Wonderful time of my career, teaching in the Armored School, and for 3 years. And then I was alerted to go to Arlington National Cemetery, where I served 2 years.
Oh, the honor guard thing?
I was not in the honor guard section. I was the battle group maintenance sergeant and on the colonel's staff for ceremonies. Most rewarding tour. And in fact, I went back there the day before yesterday to visit. Changed a great deal, because that was 29 years ago, 28 years ago. And while at Fort Myer, I met an old colonel who was tight as a drum, but he was head of enlisted assignment branch at the Pentagon. And he wanted to know if I'd work on his car. Well, I didn't have a whole lot of money living in Arlington and duties there, So if I could pick up $2 extra on the weekend, I'd do it. So I worked on his car. He was so tight. I knew he was reluctant to pay. There wasn't any minimum wage. And minimum wage to him was nothing. But anyway, we worked out all right. He said, I can never do anything for you, Sarge. He said, you let me know. Well, I thought, well, heck, you just bullshit, But anyway, I thought I'd try it. Well, I knew I was getting close to 2 years duty there. My 2-year tour was nearly finished. I wanted to go to Europe. I wanted to go somewhere on good assignment. To a good assignment. So I saw him one day and I told him I was about to leave. He said, well, I'll tell you what to do. He said, you make out a list of where you'd like to go. And I'll give it my personal attention. So I did. Well, I was down at AT Hill on a field exercise in Still Washington, down below Fredericksburg. So he called my wife, said to ask her to have me get a hold of him since I came back. I did. He had 4 assignments available for me in Germany. Heidelberg, Frankfurt, Pirmasens, and Langres, Bavaria up the mountains. He said, personally, I'd take Langres if I was you. That's beautiful up there. Of course, I wanted to get promoted. I wanted to get promoted more than anything and then get the next best duty assignment. Well, he also had Mexico City, Lima, Peru, place in Italy, Leghorn maybe, or someplace in Italy, American Embassy Motor Pool. Well, I wanted more than anything to go to Peru. I wanted to see South America, but there was no chance of promotion. So I decided on Frankfurt because it was one of the new super grade slots. So that's where we went. And I served as the chief inspector for the Northern Area Command inspection team there for quite some time. And my boss was a former motor officer for the Pentagon Motor Pool, which was good for me. Although I didn't know him personally, well, I knew of him and he knew of me in the old guard. So it was a requirement for warrant officers there in Frankfurt, throughout Europe. So I thought, well, I might better myself a little there, career-wise and everything. So I applied and was accepted in the ordnance field. That meant leaving Frankfurt, which I hated to do, but it was good for me to do that. I went to the 4th Armored Division in Ulm, Ordnance 126 Maintenance Battalion. And from there I went on up, and we served, I put in 3.5 years in Germany that time, and we had a chance to go back to the old places where we had fought through during World War II, and traveled a great deal, and it was just, to me, a very rewarding career. I could have done a lot better, and I could have done a lot worse, but I had a lot of fun. And I think my wife enjoyed it a great deal too.
Thinking back on that time in Europe when you were there in 44, 45, one of the open-ended questions I sometimes ask, is there any particular moment that you think of when you were particularly lucky? When something happened that that was simply just luck, that it went well instead of badly?
Oh yes. I remember a burst of fire that had we not had something between us, of course we would have been terminated. I remember one night we were moving along the road. In fact, it was the night that Herb Miller was hit. In fact, he's supposed to be here this afternoon from New Hampshire. Herb was a good friend. Well, he was a squad leader of the mortar squad right behind us. We were moving along this road somewhere in Central Europe. Herb can tell you, he knows it well. And good marks to prove it. We were moving along, and it had been a rainy, miserable night. We were going black now. But we put the canvas over the guy's head back there where they could get the machine guns. Of course, Nice couldn't see what you're going to shoot at anyway. So we were moving along there, and Ralph Geiger was beside me. He was assistant driver. I don't remember if Bill Schmidt was in the turret, or he may have been temporarily a platoon commander, platoon sergeant. I don't remember. Seems like it was Willie Wynn up there. We should be here very high. But anyway, the Germans got wind of where we were, and they started pouring in the artillery. And they were striking in the huge, beautiful beech trees beside the road. At least I think they were. And those big beech trees, most of the trees were pretty there until they got started up. But these shells started exploding. Well, I had the armor plate up in front, but I had the windshields in, which probably shouldn't have. Didn't make any difference. And the armor plate had little peepholes about that big, see-through little doors. So when the first shell hit somewhere near, I recall we bounced up there and we dropped that armor plate. There was one little bolt, one or two bolts, wing nuts, and you loosen that and pull these rods out and drop the armor plate. We no sooner got the armor plate down and crash from a shell. And when that shell exploded right in front of us, I remember this glass striking me in the face. A piece of shrapnel came right through that peephole. Couldn't have missed my head by more than an inch because I felt it. I felt the movement of air. Well, Geithner knew I was hit right in the head, and I thought Geithner was hit. So we were shaking each other, trying to decide who was hit. And it wasn't either one of us. And of course, the thing went between the guys in the back and out the canvas. And at the same shell, we got Herb Miller. A piece of shrapnel, I think it shredded his hand and arm, as I recall. We got him out of there that night. And there was that time, and there was other times when shells came in, and we were able to take cover enough to save ourselves. And, I remember a lot of little things, like one time we had a bunch of German prisoners, and they were older men, and they didn't have much. They had black bread, a piece of black bread in a plastic box, and they might have a piece of butter, and they might have some Norwegian sardines from they were still up in Norway. Some of them. Their sardines were excellent quality. Well, I hadn't had any sardines for a long time, and neither had a couple of other guys. It's been months. So when we were searching these German soldiers, I remember I told this other soldier, I don't recall his name, he was from our squad. I said, let's trade them some sea rations for sardines. They'd probably like to change anyway. So I told this German soldier to give me his sardines. Of course, he looked sick because that's all I had to eat. And I remember this other fellow, I think it was Jack Cotto, was a crazy guy somewhere in Pennsylvania. Old Jack said, don't get your face all out of shape. He said, we're going to give you something to eat. He said to me, what's the worst kind of sea ration we got? I said, well, I guess meat and beans, I don't know. So we gave them 3-4 cans of these sea rations each. And they were so happy because they knew they were good. Apparently they'd been told that, or somehow they may have had that. But that was one incident that I remember of a strange thing. Another one you might want to know, the humor of the American soldier. Well, some little town, seems to me it was about the same location where Sergeant Stegman battle fatigue he was overcome by that. He just kind of went out of it. And the reason he did was because he was a supply man. He wasn't really schooled in combat things. For some reason, he was moved out of supply, and you might say, handed him a rifle if you're a platoon sergeant or something like that.
an awful lot of
was not.
responsibility to
He
put on.
wasn't ready for that. He was a good man. And he just blew his top. I remember he was throwing his rifle and screaming. He just didn't want to be responsible for taking a bunch of men to their death. I think that. I don't know. And I talked to old Bill Crocker up in Missouri last year, and he said that's exactly what he thought. Bill was one of the most fair, wonderful men you could ever imagine. Still is. But anyway, to get back to this incident, we're always looking out for something different to eat. Well, a couple of guys went down the road and they found a hen coop. Well, they were going to take the hens. This old German woman said, why didn't they leave the hens and she'd give them the eggs, and when they got ready to leave, then they could have the hens. Wasn't that better? Well, yeah, they thought that was better. Well, they were back the next morning and somebody else had taken the hens. Well, they didn't want that old German woman to think that they had gone back on their word. So they went and stole 2 more chickens somewhere and put them in the old woman's chicken house. And the old woman went out and looked, and there's 2 different colored chickens. So she's trying to figure that one out. And that was the end of it. We moved out that night. But I look back at that and I think, here's a couple of guys that they gave the old woman their word. And that was pretty much it. A lot of little things happened along through, comical things, bad things. But
Imagine you could feel that you were doing something worthwhile when you did go up. I was just thinking particularly when you went up right to the front and picked up wounded people and got them back and got them out of there.
Sure. Your own safety was irrelevant. You don't even think of that. Duty comes first. Sure, that was why we were there. If it was to fight, it was to fight. If it was to recover, that's what it was. If it was to bring ammunition or food or gasoline, that's what you did.
Did the half tracks hold up pretty well?
Yeah, I'd say so. They had their problems, but they were pretty reliable vehicles. Pretty tough old thing. You had to understand them and know what to do, what precautions to take, and so on and so forth. And develop skills in driving and maneuvering the things like a tank and so on and so forth. Our trucks, our cargo trucks were some of the best that have ever been produced in the world. The old Army 2.5 ton truck. We've never had a better truck. In fact, that was a better truck. The World War II truck, the CCKW and the CCKWX, was a better truck than when they changed the models to the M series. We didn't have a truck that good of that class and never have had one since. After when I was at Fort Knox, after I came back in service, I was on TDY, that's temporary duty. I was at the Army Field Forces Test Board, working with GE people, General Motors people, and Ford people, and Chrysler people. The Army wanted a new truck. The Army didn't want it, but the Department of Defense wanted it. Well, it was pressure from up above telling these folks, you better build some new vehicles, I suspect, because we need the income. So they bought the Rio and they bought the General Motors M series. When Ford built a better truck than either one of them. But there's no need to go into that.
Well, that's the kind of thing that'll happen though.
Sure, but the merits of the old Deuce and a half, that old truck needs no eulogy. It was a great machine. It was a Deuce and a half or a 2.5 ton, but you could put 5 ton on it and go heck and back. All that truck needed was a good cab. Nothing else. I couldn't think of anything you could do to improve it. It was a truck that was made to do a job when the time was tough, or going was rough, and it did it.
I've had artillery people talk about the 105 that way.
Good gun. The 8-inch howitzer is the best gun we have in the arsenal. We've had that same gun for years. I had a lot of personal experience with them in Vietnam during my tours there. I had 2 tours in Vietnam. The 8-inch was very, very accurate and very reliable. Of course, it's now mounted on a tank carriage. I think it's called the M10. I can't remember.